The 16th century was an age when the world was still half a mystery. Maps were incomplete, and every blank space invited the courage or madness of explorers. Oceans were feared and worshipped in equal measure. To the men of Europe, they were gates to wealth and power. But for one man, they were the path to immortality. His name was Ferdinand Magellan, and his dream was to find a western route to the fabled Spice Islands, no matter the cost. Portugal and Spain ruled the known seas, fierce rivals in discovery and empire. The Treaty of Tordesillas had divided the world between them, a line drawn across the globe by the Pope himself. Portugal claimed the east, Spain the west. Yet no one had ever sailed all the way around the earth. Many doubted it was even possible. To Magellan, it was not just possible, it was destiny. He was born in 1480, in a small Portuguese village called Sabrosa, among hills that smelled of pine and smoke. As a boy, he watched ships rise on the horizon and vanish into the sunset, carrying men to distant worlds. He dreamed of joining them. At the age of 12, he became a page in the royal court of Queen Leonor, learning geometry, astronomy, and the mysterious art of reading the stars. But for all his studies, his true classroom was the sea. When he turned 25, he joined the great Portuguese expeditions bound for India. He sailed with fleets that fought pirates on the coast of Africa, crossed the Indian Ocean, and reached the Malay archipelago. In Malacca, he saw for the first time the rich trade in spices, cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, the treasures that made men kings. He witnessed cruelty, courage, and the vastness of the earth. Magellan became a soldier of the sea, a man forged by storms and steel. Yet his loyalty brought him no reward. When he returned home, scarred and seasoned, the Portuguese court turned its back on him. He was accused of trading illegally, and when he defended himself before King Manuel I, the king dismissed him with cold contempt. In that moment, Magellan's heart hardened. If Portugal would not trust him, he would offer his services elsewhere, even to their enemies. He crossed the border into Spain, a proud man exiled from his own country. In Seville, he walked the cobbled streets of sailors and merchants, clutching a dream that few believed in. He spoke of sailing west to reach the east, a plan so bold that most called it madness. But one man listened, King Charles I of Spain, a young ruler hungry for glory. Magellan's quiet conviction impressed him. He granted the Portuguese exile 5 ships, a royal commission, and a promise that whatever lay beyond the Western Sea would belong to Spain. And so in 1519, Magellan began assembling his fleet in Seville, the Trinidad, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, and Santiago. Over 200 men were recruited, Spaniards, Portuguese, Italians, and even slaves. They were adventurers, criminals, dreamers. Few would ever see home again. At dawn on August 10th, the sails were raised, and the ships drifted down the Guadalquivir River toward the open Atlantic. Magellan stood at the bow, staring at the horizon. The wind carried the scent of salt and the whisper of destiny. Behind him lay a world of courts and kings. Ahead, an ocean no one had yet conquered. The fleet sailed out of Spain and into the unknown. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The vast Atlantic stretched endlessly in every direction, a shifting desert of blue. The men grew restless. They were sailors, not believers in impossible dreams. Yet Magellan remained calm, always standing by the compass, his eyes fixed on the stars. He read the sky as though it were a map written for him alone. After 3 months at sea, the coast of South America appeared, a vast, wild land that stretched beyond sight. They followed its shoreline southward, searching for a passage that would lead them through to the ocean beyond. Storms battered the ships, tearing sails, breaking masts. Food spoiled, and tempers flared. To many, this voyage already felt cursed, but Magellan's will was iron. He believed there was a secret gate somewhere in those endless coasts, a strait that would prove the earth could be circled. As they anchored in the Bay of San Julian, winter came roaring from the south. Freezing winds howled across the decks. The men shivered, wrapped in rags, gnawing on hard biscuits blackened with rot. Then the worst fear of any captain became reality. Mutiny. Several Spanish officers, led by Captain Quesada, refused to obey a Portuguese commander. They claimed Magellan was leading them to their deaths. In the darkness, knives were drawn, muskets loaded. When the sun rose, the rebellion had begun. Magellan acted without hesitation. His loyal men struck swiftly. The mutiny was crushed in a single night of blood and fire. Quesada and the ringleaders were executed. One was quartered as a warning to the others. Magellan stood silent through it all. Leadership, he knew, demanded both courage and cruelty. Winter held them prisoner for 5 long months. When spring finally came, they resumed their voyage, following the coastline farther south until the world seemed to end in cliffs and glaciers. Then one fateful day in October 1520, the sea began to twist and narrow between mountains. The waters surged, pulled by invisible currents. Magellan's heart pounded. This was it, the passage. For weeks, the ships inched their way through a maze of icy channels. Men called it the Devil's Mouth. Snow fell endlessly. Many believed they were doomed. The San Antonio, one of the 5 ships, turned back secretly and fled to Spain. But Magellan pressed on with the others. At last, after 38 days, they emerged into a calm, endless ocean, unlike any they had ever seen. Magellan named it Mar Pacifico, the Pacific Ocean, because after months of violence and storms, it lay peaceful before them. What he did not know was that it would become the most brutal ocean crossing in human history. The Pacific, serene on its surface, was a killer. The voyage across it took 3 long months. The men ran out of food. They boiled leather straps and chewed sawdust to stay alive. Many died from scurvy, their gums bleeding, their bodies weak. Rats became worth their weight in gold. Still, Magellan refused to turn back. Ahead, he said softly to his crew, lies glory or death. Finally, after 99 days, land appeared on the horizon, tiny islands green and alive. They fell to their knees and wept. The ships anchored near Guam, where they traded trinkets for food and fresh water. It was salvation, but their journey was not over. Beyond Guam lay the fabled islands of the East, the Philippines, where destiny would take its final turn. When the fleet reached the Philippine Islands in March 1521, the men could hardly stand. Their bodies were frail, their clothes ragged, their eyes sunken from months of torment. But they had done the impossible. They had crossed the world's greatest ocean. The islands shimmered before them like a dream of paradise. Coconut palms bent in the breeze. The air smelled of salt and fruit, and the people who greeted them smiled with wonder. Magellan believed this was not only a land of trade, but of souls to be saved. He saw himself as a messenger of God, carrying the light of Christianity to distant shores. When the local ruler, Raja Humayun of Cebu, welcomed the strangers, Magellan offered friendship in return for faith. Humayun accepted baptism, and soon hundreds of islanders followed, kneeling before crosses raised on the beach. For Magellan, it was a triumph greater than any battle. He had brought two worlds together, east and west, spirit and sea. But peace did not last. On a nearby island called Mactan, another chieftain, Lapu-Lapu, refused to submit to Spanish rule. He rejected Magellan's cross and crown alike. To him, these men were not messengers of heaven, but intruders. Magellan, confident in his authority and faith, decided to make an example. Against the advice of his officers, he led a small force of 60 men ashore to face hundreds of island warriors. It was dawn, April 27th, 1521. The tide was low, forcing the Spaniards to wade through knee-deep water toward the beach. The islanders waited behind a wall of shields and spears. Magellan raised his sword and called out for them to yield. No one moved. Then a storm of arrows and stones fell from the sky. The battle was chaos. The armor of Europe clashed against the bamboo spears of the Pacific. Magellan fought bravely, wounded in the arm, then the leg. His men tried to carry him back to the boats, but he waved them off. "Go!" he shouted. "Save yourselves!" He turned once more to face his attackers, sword glinting in the rising sun. A spear struck him in the chest. He fell to his knees in the surf as the waves turned red. Ferdinand Magellan, the man who had crossed half the world, was gone. When word reached the ships, the crew was broken with grief. They had lost their captain, their compass, their dreamer. Yet they could not turn back. With only 2 ships left, led now by Juan Sebastian Elcano, they sailed onward. They reached the Spice Islands, Magellan's promised land, and filled their holds with precious cloves. Then, following his plan, they continued west across the Indian Ocean, around the Cape of Good Hope, and finally north to Spain. On September 6, 1522, after 3 years at sea, the battered ship Victoria limped into the harbor of Seville. Of the 270 men who had left, only 18 remained. They were thin, hollow-eyed, their clothes in tatters, but they had done what no one in history had ever done. They had circled the earth. The people of Seville wept as church bells rang. The sailors knelt on the dock, kissing the ground. Elcano was hailed as a hero, but in every story told, the shadow of Magellan stood tall. Though he had died before the journey was complete, it was his vision, his courage, and his unshakable belief that made it possible. Across the world, the maps changed forever. The oceans were no longer endless mysteries. They were highways linking continents. The voyage of Magellan had proven what philosophers only guessed, that the earth was one, round, and whole. His name became eternal, a symbol of courage, curiosity, and the power of a single human dream. Centuries later, his path is still traced by ships and satellites, by explorers of land, sea, and stars. Each voyage, each discovery, each question about the unknown begins the same way it did for him, with one man standing at the edge of the world, looking out and whispering to himself, "There must be a way."